All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Peter Cameron, and I'm very, very pleased to be with you today at CanGeo's first virtual conference. I think we're all getting a little bit possibly tired of the virtual platforms. I would love to be in person with you. However, the fact that Paul said that we're 500 strong just shows the passion for learning that educators have. So it's my pleasure. I've been asked to share the story, my story, but it's not just my story. It's the story of, I believe, everybody who's been touched in some way, either by Nokomis, Josephine Mandamin, also anyone who has a connection to water in some way, and whether or not you have that connection and I think of water, and we look at water, and it's everywhere. So I enjoy paddling, I enjoy skiing, I enjoy hiking, and water is simply all around us. So this is kind of the basis of my story today, and I'm happy to share it with you. I believe I'm at the end point almost in my career as an educator, as a formal educator, and this story happened at about the 22, 23 year mark of my career. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And that's going to present a few challenges for me because I won't be able to see you. And I also can't see the chat unless I'm coming back to the chat. Okay, so I think what I'll do is, I know I have a moderator as well who's helping me out. So Lisa, I know you can probably jump in as well onto the call. So if you see any pressing questions or comments, or if there's any tech issues that I need to be aware of, just feel free to hop on and let me know. Otherwise, I will be sharing my screen for pretty much the duration of the formal part of my presentation, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions, okay? So first, I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which I live and work is the traditional land of the Anishinaabe of the Fort William First Nations, and is in the Robertson Superior Treaty area. I also acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge of the Indigenous people with whom I share this land. So this is the story of Nokomis and the Junior Water Walkers. I also have the link that I'll give you a second just to kind of jot down. Feel free to take advantage of having this presentation for yourself. You can also follow along as well. And there's lots of linked resources within the presentation that you might find useful. Just want you to take a second just to think about, just to get our minds on water, to think about your connection to water. So what is your connection to water? Perhaps you can share that in the chat. It's very obviously a very open-ended question. Gail says she is water, source of life. Connection to water is Caitlin's mother, and says it's her calming place. Tori says that he or she or they use it in every aspect of their life: clothes, food, health. It's a calming place. It's a feeling of change and movement. Living in Dartmouth, lakes and oceans are part of Anne's everyday life, and water is life. Thanks for sharing. I believe my connection to water started at a very young age. I remember some of my most cherished memories of my father is at water. And I think it's water that connected us. And through water, I found a love of nature. And in looking through all of the photos that I have on my computer, I noticed that in most of them, water is present. We're always traveling around water or on water and even in water. So for me, water is important, I think, because it connects us all. And it certainly connects my family, my wife and son on the left at High Falls, and again on Lake Superior, and enjoying an inland lake. We call any lake other than Lake Superior an inland lake, even though obviously Lake Superior is a freshwater lake. And then we also find ourselves fishing often. So I think stepping outside and being outside of the classroom or our doors within our house is the importance of where water can bring us. And I think my experience with being connected to water and nature has taken me from, as a child, exploring small little creeks within biking distance of my house, the Neebing River, the McIntyre River, slowly expanding my horizons, led me to a life of travel and adventure. And just recently, in 2019, I was selected as a Grosvenor Teacher Fellow with National Geographic Education, and I had an opportunity to travel with Lindblad Expeditions and National Geographic for a 2-week expedition from Seattle, Washington to Sitka, Alaska. And being an educator who is passionate about leveraging technology to bring the world to our classroom, I believe was part of the reason why I was chosen to go on this expedition. So my water walks and my connections to water continued. And I literally took my students with me. I was doing live video feeds with my students throughout the course of the school day. I was whale watching, spotting grizzlies on zodiacs, watching glaciers calving, and my students came along with me. So I think I have a passion for adventure, and I think by simply getting outside, and maybe it was water and fishing that was that source that got me outside. So I think of water coming in many, many different forms. For me, it was a creek and a river, and that's where my dad and I spent most of our time. So I had a quest for exploration and adventure, and I wanted to find, and I wanted to explore more beyond the borders of Thunder Bay. And so this book, and I don't know if you're familiar with it, Paddle to the Sea, was introduced to me at a very, very young age in grade 3 at St. Francis School. And even though it was wintertime, we always watched it as a treat on the old 16 millimeter projectors at Christmas time. And so this was a gift to me, and it ended up being a gift that I would continue to share. And so Paddle to the Sea is the story of a young Indigenous boy, an Anishinaabe boy, living on the shores of the Nipigon River, which is only 100 kilometers east of Thunder Bay. And in 1942, when this book was written, this young Anishinaabe boy carved a canoe, set it in the river, and it's basically the story of the young boy's adventure through the 5 Great Lakes to the Atlantic Ocean. And it opened up the world and Canada's geography and history to me. And I just absolutely loved the story. And I'd forgotten about it for quite a while until I decided, actually I found it on a camping trip to a provincial park. And I decided that after reading it to my son, I would share it with my students. And so this story was one that I shared as a read aloud at the beginning every school year. And the way I presented it was as almost an adventure and a learning journey. And where the book took us was different every single year. And I started reading Paddle to the Sea. I changed it to a first-person narrative. So I changed it and started to read it as my students were, traveling through the 5 Great Lakes. And so the first day of school, I said to the students, you know, boys and girls, tomorrow we're going to be going on a canoe trip, and we're going to be exploring for a number of days. And so I want you to think about what you will want to bring with you to prepare for this journey. And make sure you tell your parents that you're going to be going too. So it was just setting up that adventure, because I find at the school that I taught for many, many years at St. Elizabeth School in Thunder Bay, many of my students didn't have the privilege of travel. Many of them never traveled outside of Thunder Bay. Many of them had never traveled outside of their own neighborhood. And so I often sought different ways to bring my students on adventures. And in fact, as I evolved as a teacher, that's the way that I wanted my students to see learning as an adventure, as a journey. And so I strayed far from the traditional texts and workbooks, and let our passions dictate where we would go. And I can guarantee you that you will find the curriculum that way. And it's a much more exciting both learning journey and adventure, not only for your students, but for yourself as well. And then I realized the power of Google Earth, and I started to leverage Google Earth and many other tech tools as a means of literally breaking down the classroom walls and bringing my students, or bringing the world to my students. We certainly traveled outside of the classroom, traveled locally, but I also traveled globally with my students. So as I was reading the story Paddle to the Sea to my students, it was a very romantic kind of a story, again, written in 1942. It gave the idea, the story gave the idea just how great the Great Lakes were. But living on the shores of Lake Superior, I didn't think that the kids quite understood, number one, the vastness of Lake Superior, but two, that even though this lake is as big and as great as it is, it's also at risk, and it's our responsibility to take care of it. Okay, so I'm just going to come back to the chat for a second as I continue the story. Okay. A yes or a no? Is anybody familiar with the story Paddle to the Sea? Okay, Anne says yes. Caitlin says no. Read in school. Okay, excellent. Thanks for sharing. Okay. If you're not familiar with it and you want to take your students on a learning adventure, I would highly recommend it. So leveraging technology, I think, in a powerful way. Not necessarily. I hear all the time, students are so engaged by technology, and what I see is a picture of 25 students in front of an iPad or a computer, a Chromebook, head down, and yes, they're fully engaged, but what are they doing? Where are they going? What experiences are they having? I think it's our responsibility as educators to really be cognizant of how we perceive engagement. So for me, students were engaged because they were communicating, they were sharing, they were working together, and they were learning in ways that our traditional means of teaching didn't provide. And so I had the opportunity through National Geographic and Google, a pretty incredible opportunity to travel. I was asked by National Geographic to go to Google headquarters, and this was before Google Earth was even available to us online. And our task was to work with 19 other educators, and I believe maybe Joel is also in the presentation. Joel was at Google with me as well. And we were asked to take basically Google Earth before it was to go web-based, and brainstorm and share with Google how we thought this platform, this incredible platform, could be used within the classroom in a powerful way that allowed kids to learn far beyond the traditional means, and to inspire them to be change makers, difference makers, not in 5 years, not in 10 years, but today. And so myself and a team of 4 other educators, thinking and keeping in mind my inspiration, Paddle to the Sea, we pitched to Google Earth an idea for a story. And our story was titled Blue Gold, Our Lakes, Our Lives. And so this story, and if you're not familiar with Google Earth Voyager stories, it's another resource that you might want to consider. So I've just entered Google Earth, and if you look to the left, you're going to find like a ship steering wheel. And this is a springboard for adventure and learning and exploration within your classroom. So think of these as novels, little novels, nonfiction, fiction, that will take your students on a guided learning journey anywhere throughout the world. And they're all based on different themes. So we have nature, games, layers, street view, culture, travel, and education. And so after pitching our story to Google Earth, we were selected to build one of the first teacher-authored Voyager stories. And like I said, it's called Blue Gold, Our Lakes, Our Lives. And I worked with a team of 4 other educators, Joel, Avzel, Jessica, and Brooke. And we created a thematic learning journey that would allow students to travel through the 5 Great Lakes to make them realize, help them realize just how great the Great Lakes are, but also to understand that their Great Lakes are at risk. And so in building our story, I had my students, we wanted to share information and take students to different communities along the 5 Great Lakes. And so my students built a video to introduce Lake Superior and Thunder Bay to the eventual readers of Blue Gold. And so their little video was embedded within Blue Gold.
Welcome to Lake Superior. We have the world's biggest freshwater lake. There is enough water to flood North and South America. There has been 350 shipwrecks in Lake Superior. The last time Lake Superior totally froze over was 1997. In 2003, it almost froze over again. Over 80 species of fish have been.
So my kids continue to share
Our home in Lake
information about their home city.
The area of Thunder Bay is fine.
So what my students didn't know is, in building this little video, I was trying to keep it a surprise as well, that this would be launched at ISTE, the world's largest education conference. I believe it was in Chicago. And the other 4 authors were going to Chicago to launch this story with Google Earth. However, I was still in the classroom, I was still teaching, and I was sad to tell, my colleagues and the people at Google Earth that I wouldn't be able to make it. But Google Earth reached out to me and proposed an idea. They said, why don't we send a documentary team to Thunder Bay, and we would love to document your kids navigating the first teacher-authored Voyager story that they helped to write. So this is a fairly big deal. I was excited to have Google come, and it was within about 3 weeks. We were expecting them at the beginning of June. And then I found myself taking my son and our exchange student at the time from France for a walk along Boulevard Lake, which is a small lake, a small inland lake that runs close to the shores of Lake Superior and gives you a beautiful view of Lake Superior as well. And I wanted Renaud just to get a sense of where we lived in Thunder Bay on the shores of Lake Superior. So we were walking, and we came across this lady. She was walking in one direction. She was walking towards us. We were walking in the opposite direction. And as we passed her, we noticed a few things that were different. She was carrying a copper pail, and in her left hand, she was walking with an eagle head staff, and she was dressed in traditional Anishinaabe clothing. And my son, as we passed, kind of wondered out loud, I wonder who that lady is, and why is she carrying that copper bucket? Does it have water in it? What's on the top of the staff? And he was full of questions, and so was I, and Renaud as well. And after about a 3-minute conversation, I said, well, Kai, we can turn around and talk to her and ask her all of those questions. And we turned around, and she was long gone. And so I continued to wonder. My son did as well. And as fate would have it, 2 weeks later, I opened up a magazine, Professionally Speaking, an education magazine put out by our Ontario College of Teachers. And as I was flipping through it on a Saturday morning, I noticed an image on the cover of a book. And I recognized the copper bucket and the eagle head staff. So I asked my son, "Guy, is that the lady that we saw?" And obviously, he thought that it was. And the book, The Water Walker, was written by Joanne Robertson. And from what I learned within just this little synopsis, is that Josephine Mandamin, Nokomis, is a grandmother. And she was part of the Mother Earth Water Walkers. And she walked around the 5 Great Lakes to raise awareness for protecting Nibe. And it was written by Joanne Robertson, an Indigenous author, water protector. It's a story and a portrait of a passionate woman who takes action to protect clean water, our most precious natural resource. And as I was reading this little book review, I just knew, obviously, that I had to get my hands on the book. And so the next Monday, I walked into the library at St. Elizabeth's School, and lo and behold, this book was on our bookshelf. And I read the book, and I realized that Nokomis lived in Thunder Bay. She was born on Manitoulin Island, but she had, in her younger years, moved to Thunder Bay. And this incredible lady, who my students would compare to the story of Terry Fox, lived in Thunder Bay. She had walked 25,000 kilometers around the 5 Great Lakes to bring awareness of the need to protect water. I had no idea why. I could not explain why I'd never heard of this lady. And I also knew that I needed to meet her, and I wanted to invite her to my classroom. And so this is kind of the turning point. I could have read the book to my students, but from what I've learned through Truth and Reconciliation is that it's not about them without them. So I reached out to Joanne Robertson, the author of The Water Walker, and through a number of emails, we built a relationship. And through our building relationship and the building of trust and respect, mutual trust and respect, Joanne talked to Josephine, and she agreed to come to our classroom. And she also agreed to come to be part of our story, our Blue Gold story. And the backstory behind Nokomis is that in 2001, she was shared a prophecy that an ounce of water would be worth as much as an ounce of gold in 2030. And the elder, the Ogama, said to her, "What are you going to do about it?" And so she thought and she reflected. And because she had such a strong connection to water all throughout her life, she decided that she was going to walk and to bring her traditions and her culture to the water walks. And she wasn't looking for fame or glory, donations. She was doing it for the water. She was praying for the water. And in her walks, she brought her soul and her being to her water walks. So I don't know if you see the connection. An ounce of water being worth as much as an ounce of gold. Our story that takes kids on a virtual field trip around the 5 Great Lakes is Blue Gold. Joanne Robertson was born in 1942. The story Paddle to the Sea was written in 1942. And I also knew that when Google Earth came and Josephine was trusting in me and my students to honor her story, she also honored and respected ours. And it was incredibly important for me to ensure that Google Earth got the story right. And so through many conversations, Google Earth came. They sent 3 incredible producers, videographers, photographers, and they came 48 hours in advance, and they learned our stories. And I'd like to share the video with you. For me, water is important because it connects us all. My name is Peter Cameron, and we're in Thunder Bay. I'm just going to pause it there for a second and just come back to the chat. Can you just give me a yes if you can hear the audio? Perfect, thank you. Ontario, and I'm a teacher. I teach everything but music and French. We're passionately learning about the Great Lakes. We live on Lake Superior, living in Thunder Bay. We don't necessarily think about invasive species and declining water levels. We don't think that the Great Lakes are also at risk. This now is what I become passionate about. One day I opened up a magazine and I saw this book review on the water walkers. And it was a children's book. It was about a lady who had walked around all 5 Great Lakes in her quest to bring awareness to water. At that point, I just knew I had to bring the book to my students. We found the author of the book, The Water Walker, on Facebook. And so I messaged Joanne, and in contacting Joanne, I also found Nokomis, Josephine Mandel. I asked her if she would visit our classroom. This opportunity that we have to share with Nokomis and Joanne, the author of the book, is incredible. We're all using different words to describe this journey that has brought us together today. A big word is serendipitous. It's supposed to happen. Water has brought us together. We created a Google Voyager story. And Nokomis, this story is the story of the Great Lakes. The Voyager story is one that is basically a thematic adventure using Google Earth along a learning journey. We had this opportunity to write these teacher-authored Voyager stories. 20 educators working in teams of 3 or 4. I sat down with a team after brainstorming for a long time. We created a pitch for a Voyager story called Blue Gold, Our Lakes, Our Lives. And the idea was we would use Google Earth to kind of take any student on a journey down the Great Lakes. Do you want to see it? The ability to travel is at your fingertips through Google Earth. This is going to be launched on Google Earth for all kids to explore at the end of June.
We're all born of water. We're all connected with water. We're all related that way, even though we're not related by blood, but we're related by water. So water is very precious for us.
Right now, you're looking at the new junior water walkers. Hopefully, we will raise awareness.
It was just really neat to meet somebody who walked around the Great Lakes and raised a lot of awareness. It inspired me that anything is possible, and no matter how big the challenge is, I should never give up.
My students now are motivated to make a difference for the Great Lakes. Our hope is that classes throughout the world will carry on Josephine's walk and become junior water walkers and adopt one body of water and work in some way to protect that body of water.
I think I would carry it on by maybe spreading awareness and telling the younger kids about it, because they're the future generations, and then they'll tell their kids and so on and so forth.
They're going to be doing a lot of water walking themselves. They're encouraging other kids in other schools to do likewise. I know that they will make an impact. Their hearts are in it.
You want kids to get excited about coming to school? Have them have the opportunity to make a difference. People listen to kids when they use their voices in a powerful way. The world is in our children's hands. And so what came of our meeting with Josephine and Joanne, who I'm still very, very connected with, and we share conversations on a weekly basis, is the Junior Water Walkers. And what we were getting into, I don't think we really knew, but what I did know is that we had Nokomis's blessing, and this was her wish. Her wish was that kids would take up her work to protect water, to take up her work to respect and protect water. And I met Josephine on 4 other occasions. We met at the water. I did a water ceremony with her. My son and I took her out for lunch, and we continued, and I continued to learn. And I being a part of a connected classroom, my students just naturally, sorry, I'm not able to advance, but I'm going to come to the next. Let's stop sharing for a sec. Okay. All right. My students, being part of a connected classroom, wanted to invite other classes. And so we did, and we used the power of social media, and I have a blog and a website as well, and we invited other classes, and other classes were inspired by Nokomis's work and the work of the Junior Water Walkers. And before we knew it, we had dozens and dozens of classes joining on to learn, adopt, protect, and walk for a body of water. Those were our 4 pillars that we established. And I was concerned because I often expressed to Josephine that I wanted to honor her water walk, and I wanted to honor her protocols and her traditions. And she kept on saying to me, if it's about the water, you're always doing the right thing. This isn't about me. This is about the water. It took me a long time to understand, I think, what Nokomis was saying. And so we, as well as many, many other classes the following year, spent the whole year on a learning journey. And my students were then in grade 5, moved to grade 6, and they led our learning journey. And it wasn't just about walking for water. If students are just walking without having learned and understanding why they're walking, I don't think we're really getting at what Josephine is wishing for us to do. And so we had many classes join us in learning about, adopting, protecting, and walking for a body of water. And you can see a number of classes. We have a Junior Water Walkers hashtag. And then we had the pandemic, and we were no longer able to meet and gather and learn, but we could certainly do that virtually. And with my students last year, I challenged them to, I walked them through the learning journey of learning about water and adopting, but I challenged my students to use Google Earth or to talk with a family member about their connection with water and think about a body of water that they would like to walk at. And as time has evolved and I've evolved and I've learned from Joanne Robertson, the author, and many, many other people who were mentored by Nokomis. Over time, we've decided to change the pillars of the junior water walkers. And so through a grant from National Geographic, we've developed a new website and new pillars, but always about the water. And what I've realized was I'm a water protector and Nokomis is a water protector, and perhaps many of you are water protectors, but it's because we have a connection to water. And so the new Junior Water Walkers website does exactly that. It encourages students, children, to build a connection to water or to further their connection to water. And that, I believe, is the most important piece. Josephine acted because she was connected. She had a strong connection to water. So the new, and this was a lot of difficult learning as well, and with the feedback from a lot of people. And if I go back to what Nokomis wrote to me and what she said to me, she said, it's about the water. It's not about me. And I've had people remind me that to me as well. And so what Nokomis did was she walked for water. But that was her idea. And that was her motivation. That was part of who she was. She decided to walk. So we still call ourselves the Junior Water Walkers because we're establishing connections to water. And in establishing connections to water, we're connecting ourselves, we're connecting with each other. And so the Junior Water Walkers website.
Hi, Peter, it's Sarah. I'm just quickly popping in. A couple of people can't see your screen, so I just wanted to double check that you were still sharing something, or are you just talking?
Well, I'm talking.
Okay.
But I should probably be sharing too, so I'm going to do that. Thanks for the heads up.
I'm going to leave, and I'm on the back end for support.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks for the heads up. So I assume that I stopped sharing my screen after the video. Hopefully you could still see the video. Okay, so let's try this, the Chrome tab. Okay, so the new Junior Water Walkers website has 4 pillars. It gives the history, but the first one is all about connecting students to water. Okay, and there's many, many different ideas, and I've kind of scaffolded the ideas as to how you can connect your students to water. And this can be done online or hybrid or ideally in person. And then after the students have established their connection to water, we encourage them to reflect, to think about. And as they're at water, hopefully they're reflecting. And as they reflect, they'll come to respect. And then eventually, in sharing the stories of water protectors, hopefully they'll be inspired by Nokomis and Autumn Pelche, who is Nokomis's grandniece, to do something and to protect water. So not necessarily to walk around a body of water, and certainly not to try to replicate Nokomis's protocols, because I believe that now, in hindsight, would be cultural appropriation. But how we did our water walk is we reached out to Nokomis's mentees. So if you choose to do a water walk, I always encourage to do a water walk with your knowledge keepers, your local knowledge keepers, and build a relationship with them. And then finally, as part of our grants, this is how I want to continue the story. To share Nokomis' story, but also to help us create our own stories. And so I now actually work at Pope John Paul, another connection. And Pope John Paul Senior Elementary School is the feeder school, where we are a grade 7-8 school, and our school actually takes our students from St. Elizabeth. So now my junior water walkers who are in grade 5 are now going into grade 8. And another interesting fact is that Pope John Paul is the former site of St. Joseph's Residential School. And so what we've done is we have purchased from a local mill, and I believe this cedar has been in this mill on the same island that I first met Nokomis, which is Mission Island, for over 50 years in storage. And we're building water boxes. So my whole school is involved in building water boxes. And the idea is that we're going to be sending these water boxes to classes throughout the world, hopefully many along the Great Lakes, with the water walker inside, along with a few other things that we're going to kind of keep as a surprise, and a journal. And the journal is meant to have each class record their learning as junior water walkers. Keep that in the journal, add a few artifacts from their learning, and then invite another class to join us as junior water walkers, and we'll pass that box along. So that is, in a nutshell, in I guess 45 minutes, the story of the junior water walkers. And I would love to invite you to join us. And you can email. We're also on Instagram and Twitter as well. So if you're interested in joining the junior water walkers in whatever capacity, I'm a guidance counselor now, so I'm doing the junior water walkers in a completely different way. We would love to have you, and that's I guess now how water is connecting us. So I'm going to stop sharing and answer any questions. Okay. So if you have any questions, you can type in the Q&A, or any comments, any ideas. Otherwise, we can call it a wrap. Just reading through all the that's the thing about the chat, is I didn't have access to the chat, so it's nice to read your comments as well. Do you have a project plan for the junior water walkers for this fall? Monique, yes. So for me, depending on where we come to, we have a junior water walkers club, and so we established that club as one of the few clubs that we ran, and we had a group of students who were junior water walkers. So we led them through the 5 or the 4 pillars. Spent a lot of time connecting to the water, and really, actually, we only got to reflect, which is absolutely fine. And so this year, that group of junior water walkers will lead the rest as well. So our hope is that people are taking the website and using it as a motivation to work with their students to in some way connect with water. And then the water boxes were supposed to be built by the end of last June, but unfortunately we were obviously online. We weren't able to build them, so that will become a project. And we're hoping to get the water boxes out ideally by the beginning of November, which then would, or even, you know, if I'm thinking about it, if we could get them out by spring. Serendipitous meeting indeed, absolutely. Absolutely, lots of threads for action. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'll share the link to the Junior Water Walkers website. And we also, if I go back, we continue to add pins to the map for the Junior Water Walkers. So anybody who's, you know, kind of signed up or committed to having their class join the Junior Water Walkers, there's just a form, and that form can be found here, and that would allow you to put your student's pin on the map as well. And so it's just a form that you could fill in, and then that allows us to pin your class to the map. Okay, keynote is starting in 5 minutes. I think I'll sign off and give you guys a 5-minute break and look forward to the next keynote. Okay, so thanks everybody. It was my pleasure.